afternoon, and thanks for sharing your Friday with us. I'm Jason Oxman, the President and CEO of the Information Technology Industry Council. ITI is the trade association of the tech industry, and we're proud to welcome you to this important discussion on technology's role in solving the climate crisis. Climate change is, without question, one of the most urgent and consequential challenges facing our planet and our economy. And as the trade association of more than 75 of the nation's leading information and communications technology companies, ITI is very focused on bringing together government and private sector to address these important issues. ITI members have made ambitious carbon reduction and neutrality commitments, more so than almost any other industry segment, and also taken significant steps to reduce the carbon footprint of both the technology sector itself and also the products and services that we provide to other industries. At ITI, our advocacy is focused on addressing both the industry's footprint itself, direct carbon emissions and impacts from the industry, and also the handprint of the technology sector, carbon reductions in other sectors achieved through the innovations provided by our industry. As we'll discuss today, tech plays an important role in the transition to a low carbon economy and to combating climate change by sharing best practices across government and the private sector. Indeed, our support of US government policies can increase relevant public and private sector collaboration. This includes our advocacy for US policymakers to set mandatory targets that meet or exceed recommendations by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We also strongly support international action in this area, addressing this crisis, and we welcome the Biden-Harris administration's immediate actions to ensure that the United States is a partner in the global fight against climate change. We also share the administration's commitment, importantly, to addressing climate change in the context of inequity and curtailing future health disparities caused by climate change. ITI, as many of you know, also incorporates the activities of the Green Grid, which is focused on data center energy efficiency. Thanks to our work through the Green Grid over the last 11 years, despite the fact that internet usage and data center usage has increased 30% year over year, we've seen data center energy usage remain flat. And we look forward to ITI and the Green Grid continuing to work together to address these issues. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest speakers. We have two of the world's best placed leaders to help address these climate challenge policy issues. We're going to hear from our two keynote speakers, and then we're going to follow with an important discussion of industry leaders to comment on their remarks. First, I have the pleasure of introducing Gina McCarthy, who recently joined the Biden-Harris administration as National Climate Advisor. In this role, a newly created position, she advises President Biden as actually the chief advisor on domestic climate change policy. She previously served for 4 years as EPA administrator in the Obama administration. We'll also hear from Lisa Jackson, who is Vice President of Environment Policy and Social Initiatives for Apple. She also previously served for 4 years as EPA administrator in the Obama administration, and was succeeded in that role by Gina McCarthy. So today's conversation will begin with our two keynote speakers, followed by our panel discussion. I want to start by turning to Gina McCarthy with this question. The data shows that no single group or industry can turn this climate change around on its own. We know that. And we also know that teamwork is going to be essential, cutting emissions, making clean energy transition, having a real impact. So let me ask you to address, because our audience consists of companies across the private sector that are interested in this issue, what is the role for the private sector, the ICT industry in particular, and for associations like ITI in helping advance the important work that you're undertaking?
Well, first, Jason, let me thank you for inviting me here, and let me thank ITI and everybody for joining. I see some very familiar names. Actually, I see Lisa Jackson's name 3 times. That may be a little overkill, I'm not, but it's great to have everybody here. And I will point out that, yes, I was the EPA administrator after Lisa Jackson, but Lisa Jackson was and remains my boss. So as long as we have all that clear, I'm all set. But listen, Jason, you're right. This is not a planetary problem that we're dealing with. It's a people problem. It is going to take all of us working together to resolve the issue of climate change in an effective way, and one that keeps our economy growing, and ones that keep people working, and one that is making sure that we are performing, to the best of our ability in the way that both our companies need, but also in a way that is what I consider to be good governance. And I think part of the reason why I joined the Biden-Harris administration is because the idea that was created for this position was to make sure that we were looking across government, not allowing these issues that are as broad as climate change in as large an issue, as an existential issue, to be minimized by looking at it one bureaucratic agency after another. Our job is actually to align in a whole of government approach where we look at what each of us can do through a climate lens, but also equally important through an equity lens, so that we know that the communities that have been systemically disinvested in are the ones that are seeing the benefits most notably. Because frankly, climate change for too long has been seen as some big and amorphous issue that scientists talked about, instead of something that's very real and relevant to all of us. And now that we have climate solutions that can be deployed at scale, there is an opportunity across the government to do that, to look for those opportunities and to work together. Plus, also, of course, and the reason why I'm here is because it's going to take not just government, but it's going to take our entire society to embrace this, not as a sacrifice moment, but as the opportunity of our lifetime, and the opportunities to hand our kids a good future. And the business community needs to help lead the way. They don't just need to help finance it. They need to do as what we're trying to do in business, which is look at how we contribute to the answers, not the problem. And I think one of the reasons why I love being here is that Lisa Jackson gets it. If you want to look at a business person who talks frankly and who is leading this effort, it's Lisa Jackson. And it doesn't surprise me at all, because she did the exact same thing when she was in government. She speaks the truth, and she speaks it in clear ways. And I will frankly follow her anywhere.
Well, let's have her follow you with those terrific opening remarks. And let's turn to the real Lisa Jackson among the 3 or 4 of them arrayed here before us.
Well, Jason, thank you. And thanks for making this time today. I'm really excited because ITI has brought us together on so many issues. There's so many issues facing our sector right now. And this one is an opportunity for us to stand up and be counted. So thank you for making the time. And thank you for giving me a chance to honor Gina McCarthy, who is been extraordinarily generous. But the fact that we have a national climate advisor, the fact that Gina was willing to go back into public service and do this job when honestly, there's no one else who can do it like Gina will do it. And we all know that. And so we all owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude, Gina. And I'm not kidding. And normally I'm kidding. So I am not kidding at all. And it is an honor to be here to support you any way we can. I even put on a jacket for you because here in Silicon Valley, we just wear a shirt. But it's for you, and knowing out of respect for everything I know you have on your plate right now. So first, just a huge, huge thank you. It's an honor. Look, from our side, y'all, from the ITI side, I've now been at Apple for, it'll be 8 years in June.
Wow.
And so many in our sector, as you pointed out, Jason, we hold ourselves up as leaders. And I think the moment that we're in is for us to continue to do that and to speak loudly and forcefully in support of what the Biden-Harris administration. You said that twice, so I'm going to use it. I have been lazy in my references to the administration, but what the administration is trying to do. We have a great story, and I'm happy to brag on Apple, but I think a lot of the folks can brag on what their companies are doing. But the most important thing we can do is to constantly refute this idea that somehow the choice to address climate change is a choice not to make money, not to have a profit, not to have a return. We are at this point, as many of us know, but we need to speak about it more and more loudly, that clean energy is actually cheaper, cleaner, more just, more equitable. And we now have partners across government, thanks to Gina's leadership, who are going to help us with those sticky issues around transmission, around permitting, around community betterment and jobs, around transition on jobs, because frankly, there's going to be transition times. We now have that partner, but I think what they need, and Gina, you said this, but is they need us to be standing up and doing what business does best. Advocate for the thing that will make us money. Clean energy, more recycling. I'm throwing that one in because recycling and materials has a huge impact on at least Apple's carbon footprint. And I know we're going to hear from our friends at Samsung soon, but I think they'll probably say the same. The opportunities to think about sourcing materials like rare earth elements from recycled materials, I think is a huge advantage for our country, and one that's clean, along with the mining of rare earths that I know the administration is looking at. So, this is about us doing everything we can. Many of us have made pledges, the most aggressive ones out there. Apple's 2030 carbon neutral for our manufacturers and our products. We're already carbon neutral, but I think it feels like it's a moment to maybe sit back and say, isn't it someone else's turn? But I think what we really need to be doing in this moment is advocating for the business and economic solutions that make the most sense. And that's looking forward past this horrible pandemic to the leadership we're seeing coming out of this White House.
Appreciate that very much. And Lisa, let me just ask you one quick question before I go back to Gina on this. Apple properly gets credit and is getting credit today for a lot of the calls you've made to government action on climate policy. And you joined a number of companies very early on, right after the election, calling for President Biden to cut greenhouse gases by at least 50% by 2030 and to be carbon neutral by 2030. How have you made this a core of Apple's corporate policy and what you advocate for, and how are you issuing a call to other companies to join in this effort?
Even when things weren't quite so friendly to climate change in Washington, we continued to use our voice. I mean, our CEO uses his voice, as many of the CEOs in the tech sector have, but we need to continue to urge the highest voices in our companies to speak up about this moment and this transition that we're in. But we also lobby, we use the terrible L word, which is we're on, we have a person on our team, Arvin Ganson, who both Gina and I know, whose job it is, who was hired to lobby for the clean energy solutions. Because our other point is we happen to be headquartered in California, where we have a good amount of energy choice. We have a facility in Texas where we have a good amount of energy choice. Why don't other businesses have that choice? Why aren't there opportunities for businesses? Shouldn't have to be in the business of developing solar or wind, right? They should be in the business of saying, I'd like to purchase it. And it should be at a competitive cost because it should be, it is. So I think the advocacy around clean energy, the advocacy around issues that ITI represents for our sector, I think clean energy, we have to be a voice for that, as well as for recycling and resource efficiency for those of us who are in the hardware side of the business as well. And I don't put a number on it. I know there's a lot of calls. Part of what we do is I sort of laughed when we are advocating to the administration to do something, because I know that feeling where you're working as hard as you can and people are telling you to do even more, but it's done from the spirit of showing that we actually think that is what is good for American innovation. That is what will keep us ahead of the pack instead of trying to catch up.
And speaking of American innovation, let me come back to Gina McCarthy with a question about the connection between the success of our economy and these important climate issues. You traveled with the president to Pittsburgh for the announcement of the American Jobs Plan, obviously a cornerstone initiative that the president announced very recently. Can you help us understand the connection between the American Jobs Plan and this climate crisis? It was important for you to be with the president for that announcement. Help us understand how those two fit together.
I think one of the cornerstones of the American Jobs Plan was a recognition that our ability to address climate change should be born on sound economic policy, because it can be. You know, we just received a letter signed by 310 businesses and investors that did as Lisa Jackson earlier on did, which is demand that we significantly cut our greenhouse gas emissions as a country by 2030 to the order of 50%. And there's a reason for that. It's because we can and we should. It is the best way for us to actually advance job growth is to look at the clean energy economy and how we use that to reinvigorate our manufacturing, how we listen to our manufacturers like our auto manufacturers, who for the most part are standing up saying, we're going to do electric vehicles and maybe 100% by 2035. You know, these are all signals being sent to us that a clean energy future is the future. And the American Jobs Plan was all an underpinning that recognized that coming out of a pandemic, you don't just jump to an, oh, woe is me, climate change is happening. You jump to, oh, we have an opportunity here. We need 10 million jobs to be rebuilt. How are we going to get that done? Well, we can get that done by investing in America again. We can get that done by actually growing good union jobs. And that is going to raise our ability to expand the middle class again. And we can do it by grabbing back and reinvigorating our manufacturing sector. We can do that by actually charging the utilities, by telling them, hey, now it's time to recognize that the clean energy is our future. We're going to invest in the grid and make sure that renewable energy is accessible and there's resilience in the grid system. So you're going to start investing in a clean energy future with us. So we're going to build those EV charging stations, but we're going to do it with the private sector because we know that government's job is to send signals about our values and where we need to head as a country. But it's the private sector that turns that into a money-making, job-winning opportunity. So the exciting thing about the American Jobs Plan is it is simply smart economic investment on how we're going to win the future. You know, we're not actually demanding that we make change. We're recognizing that change is where we're heading. And it's up to the United States to invest, not just to keep up, but to win that future. And so it's really an exciting moment. People are just ready to get away from this pandemic and to stop thinking about being stuck in our homes and to start thinking about how we can be great again. We just have to get away from the partisanship that has divided us and start working for the people of the United States so they can put food on their table, so they can have homes, like 2 million of them we want to invest in, that are going to make those homes efficient and resilient and stand the test of time. We're going to start investing in our roads and bridges and our water systems, get the damn lead out of our water pipes once and for all. We're going to invest in schools. I mean, we are talking really here about a moment in time that shifts from what we've seen over the past year in terms of all of us feeling like we're on the edge of our seats as to whether or not next week is going to be a good one or a terrible one. And we are going into a moment in time where I think we can actually bring people out of their homes soon. We can get them working again. We can build the resilience in our systems and our infrastructure that we need. And we can invest a significant amount of money as part of the racial reckoning that if we don't complete this challenge of getting equity into our system, then shame on us. And President Biden is not going to spend anything less than 40% of our benefits and our investments in those communities upfront right away. So the best part of this is I don't have a section on equity. I don't have a section on climate. I don't have a section on jobs. It is an intersectional understanding of how those things weave together to make our country really, really fly again, which is, I think, what everybody is dying to hear. And I think they're hearing it, and we plan to deliver it.
And Lisa, you've spoken out about the American Jobs Plan as well, particularly on the important climate and energy investments in the infrastructure bill itself. Can you talk about why you're advocating on behalf of those investments and why you think that kind of spending, that kind of investment in infrastructure as to climate and energy policy is so important?
Yeah, look, I think our sector, first off, I love it when Gina gets fired up. So I'm happy to just be quiet and let her go now because she's gonna tell us what she needs us to do, and that's why we're here. But look, our sector is built around innovation, right? It's built around this idea of America leading the world in developing the products and services that we want, we need, and that take us to 2030 and beyond. And so to have, what a difference to have an administration that's putting the wind at our backs in all the things many of us have been working on for years and years and years, longer than I've been at Apple. A lot of the folks in ITI have been leaders in continuing to move sustainability forward. So now to have an infrastructure bill that comes out that represents basically major climate action. That's what we see there. And it makes real investment in technologies so we don't always have to. I mean, in many ways, a lot of the companies on this phone call have been investing in technologies and continuing to purchase them to keep that market going because it made business sense, but also we knew we played that role and could play that role to keep the fires warm as we continue that innovation. So we need to get away from this trade-off between environmental progress and short-term gains. We can help with that. We need to see environmental solutions. And for some of the companies on this call, some of the solutions could also be business opportunities. You know, we just heard Gina speak about vehicles, electric vehicles. We heard her talk about the grid. We heard her talk about opportunities in more construction-oriented work like rechanging out pipes. Those are all the kinds of jobs and investments in our country and in our communities that actually, I think, make it stronger for us. Someone asked me this yesterday and they were like, well, why? I was like, business has always been in favor of infrastructure investments because we use them too. I mean, we benefit from communities that have strong education, strong healthcare systems, strong opportunities. And so, and equity. And I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't be more appreciative for the strong and constant focus on equity that we're hearing from this administration. So I have no doubt it'll be a ripple impact, but for us in our sector, I just feel like this is exactly the work so many of us have been committing to.
And one of the areas that the Biden-Harris administration is very focused on to move these issues forward is international and reminding countries that the US is seeking now to be a partner on climate policy. Gina, next week, the US will host the first ever Leaders Summit on climate change. Can you tell us a little bit about the idea that brought that summit to happen and what you're looking to accomplish next week?
Yeah, I mean, the idea was that we would actually not just rejoin the Paris Agreement, which President Biden signed an executive order to do day one, but we'd meet our commitments. And so I think we had to really recognize that over, in the prior administration, the commitment was not there on climate change, and it certainly wasn't there in being a party to the Paris Agreement. And so we needed out of the gate to say, okay, we're back. The United States is back in, but of course you have to be humble in how you do it. And so what we decided to do is not only just have a good domestic message about what we could commit to do, which was to develop our next countrywide, what they call statewide commitment, which is our nationally determined contribution, which is the job that we have in the domestic office, is to look and work with every agency to identify the opportunities for greenhouse gas reductions as well as carbon sequestration, and see what we can commit to by 2030 in terms of greenhouse gas reductions on a baseline of 2005. And so we're going to be prepared to make an announcement on what that looks like over the coming week. And we also have Secretary John Kerry, who is also a special advisor to the president, and his envoy, his international envoy on climate. And John's been doing what John always does, which is he's an ever-ready bunny that floats around the world and bothers every other world leader, asking them what they're going to do. He's just doing some exciting negotiations with other countries, letting them know that we're back in business, that we're serious about climate. We're going to make a serious commitment moving forward. And that way we can jumpstart towards the road to Glasgow in November, which is where the next conference of the parties is being held. And we'll go there with a strong commitment, but also hopefully having brought the leaders of other countries together on Earth Day, which is Thursday, for those of you who are not clued into environmental big times. I won't tell on you, but you should have known April 22nd. We're going to get together on the 22nd and the 23rd. President Biden will be making the opening remarks. We'll have a lot of opportunity for discussion. But we also know that there's going to be a lot of side events. And really, it's sort of where you started, Jason, asking about, do we need to do more than what we're already doing? This is an opportunity to try to get our country feeling good again about our climate commitments, respecting the young people who pushed us so hard on this, respecting all the women who have worked hard to push all of us and recognize the challenges that women have been facing over this past year. It's about rebuilding our care economy, which the president is highly invested in, and you'll hear lots more about that. So I think it's just an exciting moment. We'll have the business community involved, and we'll make sure that we keep pushing for the American Jobs Plan to get over the finish line in Congress. But honestly, we're going to make it one way or another. And I probably should have mentioned, and you shouldn't be shy about recognizing it, is there's $100 billion in this plan for the expansion of broadband. Now, I know that may not be a big deal to everyone, but I think you guys get it. The president basically said, you're worried about whether broadband fits into the infrastructure definition. Man, it's electricity for this century, right? And if any time we've had to recognize that broadband and less expensive internet is a critical investment for everyone, it should have been this past year, because that's how our kids got to learn while we were locked in our houses. And so I'm just really excited. I think it's going to be a great 2 days. I think we're going to show the world that we're back. And I think that puts us in a position to look at how we strengthen the Paris Agreement, recognizing that the science continues to move on. We continue to lose time, which we can't afford. We now have to stick with 1.5 degrees centigrade, and we have to run to get to this finish line together. And that's what this is all about.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to watching progress there, and we certainly agree that broadband is as critical as electricity and water to all Americans right now. So we appreciate that as well. Lisa, I want to ask you about, maybe provide a little bit of a call to action to the dozens and dozens of companies that are watching this right now. talk a little bit about where you see opportunities for industry to collaborate with the Biden-Harris administration on all of these important issues. And I also want to make sure to ask you, you issued a very clear call to the SEC, asking them to require companies to disclose their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Help us understand why that's important, why other companies should get behind that as well. Where are you looking for industry to work with the administration most closely?
Yeah, on the SEC call, we've been at this for a decade, managing and mapping and counting our carbon footprint. And I can just tell you in the time we've been doing it at Apple, how much we've learned. How many times we've had to say, you know what, this estimate isn't exact. It overestimates and underestimates, but we do it every year. Usually right around this time, we release our environment report. We released it yesterday, and it has, our annual carbon footprint. And I don't know how you're gonna manage it if you don't measure it. And I think our tracking of greenhouse gases has given us the glide path to get to carbon neutral. We are carbon neutral today because we have such a good handle on where the carbon comes from and what we can do to reduce it. We're now in the process of trying to bring that to our supply chain, because for suppliers, besides the tremendous opportunity in energy efficiency and water efficiency, they're wanting to be part of the clean energy revolution as well. And so they need to understand where their carbon footprint is so they can know what's left after they switch to clean energy, which many are doing. We think disclosure should be public. It should be transparent. We think it should be audited. We think it should be mandatory. And we really want to work with the SEC on rules because, of course, rules are still rules, and we want to make sure they work for our sector and that they build on what we've already learned, because it is very much a dynamic system. Even with the best intentions, you may not have a handle on all of your emissions, and you may have to amend them or change them or come back and revise them. And we don't want industries who are trying to do it right to be in the position of therefore having to do it not right, I won't say wrong. So we think there's a lot that we and that ITI, and we're going to be a voice on this as a company as well, but that in addition to leading and calling for that kind of disclosure, that we also, that ITI can really help. Just some of the other really quick ways, I mentioned them, but obviously the clean energy transition, the work inside supply chains, the so-called scope 3 emissions. Our plan has us reducing our carbon emissions 75% or more by 2030, but there will still be a need to offset some of the emissions, which at least sitting here today, we will not all have been able to tackle. And so high quality offset programs, yesterday we announced a new fund dedicated called the Restore Fund, where Apple's going to put up $200 million with Conservation International, Goldman Sachs, to try to establish once and for all that sustainable forestry that actually produces the products that our economy needs, like wood, to build, or paper and pulp. That if that is done in a way that's smart, it creates a return for those companies, but it also removes carbon from the air. We think you have to measure both. And so that's going to be an opportunity. So the last thing I'll just say, because now I'm fired up a little bit, is I think one of the things we all have to guard against is offsets that have people to come to believe that this is all just some accounting in the air. There will be more than enough naysayers, including some of our friends in the environmental advocacy community, who will want to say there is no place for offsets. There has to be. But we should not go to them first, and we should insist on very high quality offsets, and we should insist that we understand how they're impacting local and indigenous communities, because we don't need offsets if they mean that the community that was relying on that land and had protected it for so long is suddenly no longer able to do that. So it's a heavy burden, and it feels a little like public policy, but there are all areas I think where we can all lead as a sector.
We're coming to an end of our time with our two speakers, and before we transition to our panel, I want to leave our audience with your thoughts on the environmental justice component of all this important work. Gina McCarthy, I want to start with you. The pandemic clearly has put into relief the massive overlapping issues of racial and environmental injustice. And you alluded to this in your opening remarks, that this is a core component of what you're focused on. Can you talk to us and leave us with your thoughts about how the administration is focusing on climate inequities and environmental pollution at the same time, domestically and internationally, and what you're looking to us in industry to do to help support your work?
Well, actually, I think Lisa gave a good tee into this, because what she described is a company that's a steward. And I think that's what we need to be, is we need to look outside ourselves at where the impacts are of our actions. And really, President Biden has understood and embraced this issue, but none of this is going to be easy. We have identified ways that we can really, across the whole of government, continue to have the lens of looking at equity as we move forward. And the president strongly committed to it. But we also created a White House Environmental Justice Council, whose job is to watch us and to track it. Lisa's right. If you don't measure it, if you don't evaluate it consistently, it's meaningless. And we want them to tell us how we're doing, not them to tell us what to do, because we should be looking at moving forward as a government to address this issue. And they should have the flexibility and the wherewithal provided to them to be able to see and track what's going on. We're also starting a new office within the Department of Justice. It's an Office of Climate Justice, because we know that enforcement is not happening in some of these communities. And we just can't allow ourselves to get away with that anymore. If we really want to embrace the challenge of equity and justice, which our democracy was formed on, and we want to continually do better, then we have to be open to others' scrutiny. We have to do the best we can. We have to think of it not as a side issue, but a fundamental value that we apply to everything we do.
And Lisa, I'll give you the last word on this. Your call to action to your colleagues in industry on the environmental justice portfolio that Gina McCarthy has described.
Yeah, so Gina, obviously this is going to be led by government, and it should be. This is fundamental protection of the people, in a democracy, a government for the people and of the people, protecting everyone. You cannot solve the climate problem or any pollution problem if you don't solve it for everyone. The wind blows and water moves. And so that pollution is going to end up being a problem for all of us, especially something like climate change. But I do want to speak to our friends on the private sector, because you might say, okay, well, that's a great government thing, environmental justice. What can I do? Here's just two ideas. It might not work for your company, but think about, we also have a racial equity and justice initiative, which we started last June. Think about what you spend in the United States. You buy services, you buy goods and supplies. First, just in general, making sure that your minority or Black and Brown owned business programs are really trying to help build wealth in communities. What all communities want is just a shot at the same American dream that we've all benefited from. But, then we have, one program, which we're just starting, so ask me about it in a year, called the Impact Accelerator. We spend a lot of money on clean energy projects. We're looking for Black and Brown owned businesses in the environmental sector that we can help mentor, nurture, and hopefully purchase from. Last thing I'll say is, especially if you're broad in terms of your reach, we are finding some real success in breaking up procurement actions into smaller chunks, because there are very few businesses that can compete if you look at all of what Apple buys. But if you look at it on a geographic location, you can start to nurture those businesses. If Gina is successful, there will be all kinds of energy efficiency and clean energy businesses that are going to grow up in communities. We should be part of their customer base wherever we can. So, but thanks for asking, Jason. That's cool.
Well, thank you for a very comprehensive answer. And this is the point at which I sadly must thank our two keynote speakers. Gina McCarthy, thank you for, first of all, returning to government and offering your services on these important issues. We look forward to being supportive to all of your efforts going forward.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks, Lisa. It's great to see
And
you.
Lisa Jackson, thank you for your leadership at Apple, for bringing the spirit of industry collaboration and action to us at ITI. And thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. And Gina, happy Earth Day.
Thank
Keep it
you.
going,
You
woman.
too.
Happy
All right,
Earth Day
thank
to all. And thank you very much. And I'll now invite our panelists to turn on their cameras and unmute their microphones and join us. And I have the pleasure of following up that terrific discussion with in-depth analysis and further debate on all of these important issues. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Barbara Humpton, who is President and CEO of Siemens Corporation, Susan Uthayakumar, who is President of Sustainability Business Division at Schneider Electric, and John Godfrey, Senior Vice President of Public Policy at Samsung, three terrific ITI members, leaders in their field. And welcome to all three of you, and thank you for continuing our conversation on environmental, climate, and environmental justice issues. Barbara, I'd love to start our discussion with you. Siemens, of course, was the first global industrial company to commit to carbon neutrality. Can you talk to us about how Siemens made that decision and maybe share some lessons learned about being an early adopter that would be useful for other companies who are watching now and might be considering making a similar commitment?
Jason, I'd be happy to, and thank you for including Siemens in this important discussion. It's great. I love looking at the list of participants. What a great group on a Friday afternoon. Yes, cast your mind back to about 2010. Siemens actually was working on strategy and recognized global megatrends, climate change being one of them, but urbanization, an aging demographic across humanity around the globe, ever increasing global supply chains, and the digitalization of everything. So building a business strategy around inexorable forces is a powerful thing. I arrived at Siemens at about that time. And by 2015, it was clear that in order to address the climate change issue, it was important that we look at our own operations. So making the commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030 and to be halfway there by 2020 was the audacious goal set at the time. I'm happy to report that we tallied the numbers in 2020 and we have actually achieved 54% of our goal. So well on our way, but there's lots of hard work to do. And I really appreciated Lisa's comments, because the interesting thing about this is that you get into it and then you begin to ask yourself the question, what are the interrelationships? Now we're taking a very broad look. As we think about the next decade, we're beginning to ask ourselves the question, what about the scope 3? What about the work we do with our customers, our suppliers, et cetera, just as Apple is doing? And so we've seen the creativity of our team really ramp up. Our supply chain organization created a green digital twin that they can use to actually assess the sustainability of a supplier's offering. And we're able to use that to inform our choices. Of course, when you see that, what you suddenly realize is I can turn around and do the same thing to help a customer understand the green digital twin of their enterprise. So what has happened in this decade of change for us is the idea that this is all interrelated and we look at this end to end.
Well, that's terrific. And back in 2010, when you did that, I can imagine that you had no idea what the rest of the industry, the rest of the world, the rest of corporations might do. But certainly being a trendsetter, it's probably nice to look back and see how many followed your lead at the time. So terrific. And congratulations on that history and on moving it forward. Susan, I want to turn to you at Schneider Electric. Earlier this year, Schneider was recognized as the world's most sustainable company by Corporate Knights. Congratulations on that. And of course, I have to ask, to what do you attribute that recognition? And what advice are your customers and your prospects asking you for as they travel down their own sustainable journeys?
Well, thank you, Jason, for having me on the panel. And it's great to represent the Schneider perspective on this. We started our sustainability journey 15 to 20 years ago. We realized that our purpose, our mission is to really be efficient in how we use resources and energy for ourselves. And that's the bridge to making sure the future is sustainable and available for everybody else. So in the journey that we took, we really understood a lot about how to make our own facilities to be zero emission. We started to work with the supply chain a while ago in terms of making sure, how do we bring in the scope 3 emission reduction that we all need? And as we embarked on this strategy and these initiatives, with our capability in energy management and with our capability in automation, what we realize is that we can help our clients and our customer base decarbonize as well. So 10 years ago, we launched a service called Energy Sustainability Services. And with that, what we do is we work with our customers to advise them on what is their decarbonization footprint today, what is their CO2 footprint today, and what are the things that they can drive to make sure that they are reducing their emission, and how can they get on their journey of zero emission or lower emission or whatever their goals may be. So I think by doing a lot of things and being able to put those goals boldly, like Barbara just mentioned herself, is that we really push ourselves to deliver, and we also take the opportunity to disclose what we do. Because we want to hold ourselves accountable for what we say we do. And in Schneider, we take it one step further by saying to our employees, this is the mission and purpose of our employees. And our incentives are also tied to what we call the Schneider Sustainability Index. So we hold all of us accountable, and we make sure that we have alignment throughout the organization. And all of these efforts has culminated in us being named the most sustainable corporation, for which we're super proud of. And it's an accountability that we take very seriously, Jason.
That's great. Thanks, Susan. And John, speaking of awards, Samsung recently awarded the Energy Star Corporate Commitment Award, which you'll have to tell us more about. It's based on Samsung's holistic approach to energy efficiency. So tell us your view. Well, first of all, tell us what led Energy Star, the program, to award that to Samsung, but also given Samsung's long support of Energy Star, which is, I think, one of the best known public sector, private sector partnerships on energy efficiency. Tell us your view on how other companies should be looking at the Energy Star program, and maybe other programs that bring that kind of public-private partnership to bear as we look to address these ambitious climate goals.
I will. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it's very exciting in this panel, right after hearing from two former EPA administrators, to be able to share with the audience, if you don't know already, about the EPA Energy Star Partner of the Year awards, that Samsung this year has won the Corporate Commitment Award from Energy Star, which is rarely granted. The last time was 9 years ago. And it's for partnership across the range of the Energy Star programs. In our case, we are a product manufacturer and also operate facilities. And on the facility side, we help them create a new program for tenant space for companies that are tenants in office space. They don't own the building. It can be a little trickier to manage energy efficiency, but we're innovating in that area with EPA. But obviously, the biggest impact of Samsung on energy use is our products. We make and sell a lot of products that use electricity around the world. So we have really focused on the efficiency of those products, everything from smartphones to refrigerators, to heating and air conditioning. And I guess we won our first Partner of the Year award over 10 years ago. And over that time, to give you an idea of the impact that energy efficiency can have on mitigating climate change, and that any company that makes things that use energy can help mitigate climate change by innovating and investing in efficient products. What we have done is since 2009, the improvements in efficiency of the products that Samsung makes has enabled the users, our customers, consumers, to avoid energy usage that is equivalent to 270 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions using those products. What's interesting about that is that that number is more than double the greenhouse gas emissions and power consumption from our factories over that same period. And Samsung, if you don't know, we make most of our stuff ourselves. We're a very vertically integrated manufacturing company. So rather than having an outsourced contract supply chain, we are directly responsible for the emissions of our manufacturing, the impact of our manufacturing. So we're really happy about the improvements on the efficiency side. And we can talk about the operations side more in a minute if we have time. But Energy Star, I'll just wrap up by saying, is, as you said, Jason, it is a shining example of government and industry and the non-government sector, academic, environmental advocates, all working together in a voluntary partnership. The brand is recognized by 91% of consumers, which is maybe the most successful government brand, I think. It's certainly up there, and stands for efficiency and helping the environment and saving consumers money on their electric bill. And because it is a partnership program, it can really be innovative and forward-leaning and make an impact. So just can't say enough good things about the Energy Star program.
Great. Thanks, John. Barbara, Siemens has such a great story to tell. You told us a little bit about being a pioneer in taking an industry role in fighting climate change. But Siemens is so engaged around the world in so many aspects of manufacturing and infrastructure. I wanted to ask for your thoughts, having heard Gina McCarthy's kind of call to action, if you will, asking all of us in industry to take a role in addressing the climate goals of the Biden administration. How do you envision industry's role in addressing climate change? You've got 300,000 people, Siemens professionals around the world, working on so many different aspects of this. We could probably spend hours talking about it, but from your point of view, what's the most important role for industry to play to help address these goals?
Yeah, this links perfectly to simply who we are. Like Susan mentioned earlier, being purpose-driven. Siemens has built an organization full of inventors, makers, engineers, and we have know-how in things like electrification, automation, and digitalization. Now, give us a goal and watch what happens. So to have government, as they were voicing earlier, this whole concept of being able to create that framework where we understand what the goal is, and then unleash the power of innovation of private businesses, we'll really see phenomenal things happen. And I'll give you an example of what I envision happening, especially under what I believe will come to pass with the American Jobs Plan. This idea of a giant step forward in electric vehicle charging that's an audacious goal, right? That's one that we can all get behind. People have asked me, what is the role of government in that? What I'm hoping is that government will make it clear that we need actually to invest, and that we need open standards, a lightweight framework in which industry can innovate to bring the best possible products to the market. So today, if Siemens has 65,000 EV chargers across the country, how do we make a step change working with utilities, working with fleets of vehicle owners, working with actually landlords who have fleets of buildings? We have an opportunity to actually transform the way that infrastructure comes to be. And I would say we can take the Energy Star model as a shining star. As John described, it's a really cool framework that has driven innovation now for such a long time, and everyone recognizes the brand. So this is the way we're hoping to work together with government. Of course, we are actively engaged using our voice, not only here in the US, but around the world. What I've offered to the Biden administration as we get started is the deep expertise of the team at Siemens to be able to inform decision makers about, what's the art of the possible right now. What we hope is that this framework of regulation, legislation will remain light so that we do see the ability of private industry to drive at a pace that's going to meet the true need of the mission that we have ahead of us.
And Susan, let me ask you about Schneider Electric's plans. Barbara has issued a terrific call to action to all of us to support climate initiatives in government with the work that we do in the private sector. What is Schneider hoping to see out of the administration? What policy initiatives do you most hope to see from the Biden-Harris administration to support the industry's climate efforts?
So we are very engaged with the administration in terms of wanting to partner and to bring our knowledge base on the changes that we would like to see. So if I step back and look at it, Barbara spoke of it, step change. How do we do that? So we have technology that exists today. And then if we can scale that up and if we can deploy them in all forums that we can, the impact would be tremendous in terms of addressing climate change. So specifically, where we would like to see the collaboration with the administration on, the administration is already looking at retrofits and in buildings. And if you look at buildings, 40% of the emissions comes from buildings, but the repairs and retrofits touch about 1% of the buildings that exist today. So imagine a future where we are building and constructing with a low carbon footprint in mind. You can use digital twin, you can use connected products, you can use connected systems. And if we build for the future today, that we are solving a problem in the future, in the present time. So I would like to see the administration bring about change in how we're designing and building buildings and other infrastructure along the country for sure. The second thing that we would really like to partner with and see is the transition towards a cleaner energy. So obviously grid modernization is at the top of priority for the administration. We really need to make sure that we make the energy transition possible. We think about how we bring energy generation into facilities and smaller buildings with microgrids. We need to think about new innovative models of businesses. So energy as a service, how do we facilitate it? How do we finance them? And how do we incentivize the adoption of these business models and technologies is super important. And I would also like to touch on the fact that a number of people, including Gina, mentioned it in the discussion. When you measure something, you make sure that progress happens. So in terms of disclosure relative to climate change, it's something that we really need to drive together as a community, and as partnership between the administration and with the industry.
John, you mentioned in your opening remarks the idea of the life cycle of manufactured goods. And obviously, Samsung is a manufacturer of so many different segments here in the US, from microchips to appliances and everything in between. Can you talk to us a little bit about this life cycle idea and how Samsung looks at and how the industry should look at climate change through manufacturing operations and across the life cycle of products?
Sure. Well, thank you, Jason. As I mentioned, a large part of the climate impact from products that use electricity is the efficiency of those products. So over the entire life of the product, how have you minimized the amount of power they have to draw out of the power grid? Electrification is helpful as well. So you can at least potentially drive the electricity usage from green power sources. And I will mention, at least briefly, that we made a commitment to, by this year, move to 100% green power sourcing for all of our factories and offices and warehouses, all of our operations in the United States, China, and Europe. And we have achieved that happy to say, as of this year. Then looking at other aspects of the product life cycle, of course, it's the materials content, use of recycled materials. As one example, we've gone to eco-conscious packaging, plastic-free in smartphones, which we received a prize from the EPA for. And I know we're out of time, so I will finish with recycling, end of life, take back. Also very important that that be done in a way that's convenient for consumers and is done responsibly and protects the environment.
That makes good sense. Thanks, John. And Barbara, I want to come back to you because you alluded to this, the impact that Siemens is having and that our industry broadly has on other industries. Siemens obviously is a manufacturer that enables technology, products, and services for so many different industry segments, from rail cars to batteries and everything in between. And I wanted to ask you about some of the most promising emerging technologies that you're working on, that Siemens is deploying to its customers. We call this the handprint as opposed to the footprint. The ICT sector has a handprint of other industries whose companies use our products and services. So how is Siemens helping, and how do you think the industry more broadly can help our customers, other industries, decrease their own carbon footprints in other sectors?
This is such an exciting question because, again, there's so much innovation going on right now. John, I loved your stat before. Siemens handprint, as we've measured it, and we reported, I'll refer to a 2019 report, is 130 million metric tons of carbon reduction, which we are very proud of. But John, I think what you're doing is fabulous. As we think about in what way can we have the greatest impact, we have this core understanding that the last decade was about bringing new tools into what I'll call the Internet of People. Right? We got new ways of getting connected in communication and entertainment and finance, and our whole retail life has changed. That same technology is now coming to the Internet of really big things that Siemens is involved in, whether it's trains or buildings or energy systems, et cetera. And it's that convergence of the virtual with the physical world that gives us new controls. We keep talking about operational technology, and we are proud ITI members, but we recognize that we're a little different than many members who are truly in the information technology world. But the fact is that information technology, operational technology, while we have different characteristics, watch this space, because the amount of growth that's about to happen in the Internet of Things is actually going to dwarf the transformation that's happened with the Internet of People. So here we sit at the beginning of a decade of transformation, and it's a brilliant moment because it's also the beginning of this decade of change for climate. And the way we've been talking about assessing and addressing the triple whammy, being able to be more sustainable, equitable, but also advancing our capabilities at the same time. So digital controls for everything from trains to power grids to our vehicles, digital tools to help us envision, design, and plan the future of manufacturing. All of these things are going to be transformative, and the tools are right here at our fingertips right now. So the key question for us at Siemens is, how fast can we move? Now, can I just say one other thing? Because I do think it's a moment for deep, deep humility. Who knows what we're working on right now that a decade from now we'll say, my heavens, why didn't we anticipate this? And so, what Lisa said earlier about recognizing as we progress, we're going to discover things that the materials for batteries, for instance, how are we going to grapple with that as a world? We're focused on greenhouse gas emissions, but we also have to take a moment and remind ourselves we don't yet know what are all the problems we have to solve. So dematerialization is going to be absolutely important for all of us, and we need to think it through holistically, work it through holistically. Jason, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. And you also make me think about other ancillary impacts of these important climate issues. and we heard it from both Gina and Lisa as well, and that is the environmental justice component of these climate issues. And I actually want to throw this out to all three of you and ask for your thoughts on how we should be thinking about incorporating environmental justice considerations into these climate policy issues, how maybe you're thinking about these in your own missions and operations, and maybe some of the initiatives you hope to see the administration support as part of this. So John, maybe I can start with you, and then to Barbara and Susan as well.
Thanks. And Jason, also, when I said a few minutes ago that we were out of time, obviously I was thinking 4 o'clock, and of course this runs till 4:15. So sorry about that. I just got confused about the time.
Hey, it's like
I wasn't
stoppage
trying
time.
to stop you.
That's right. That's right. Only I have the watch. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I shouldn't hold that up to John to see that.
No, that's all right.
All right, thanks. So John, go ahead on this.
Yes, thank you. Well, one aspect of environmental justice is that that products that are efficient, products that are made responsibly, products that can be taken back at end of life and refurbished or extended or recycled responsibly, those kinds of products not just be premium products. They should just not be the high end that are available only to people of means. It should be really, that should be designed, that approach should be throughout the product line. And we are proud and pleased that the Samsung products that have won Energy Star recognition are not just the highest end. I also want to echo something that Gina McCarthy said a minute ago about equity and justice and the president's interest in broadband and universal access to broadband throughout the country. That's certainly an equity issue for people's access to healthcare, to jobs, to education. And it also has an environmental component as well, because a lot of people in rural areas maybe doing a job and not having to travel as much to their job if they're able to do it online, or even in urban communities, maybe cutting down on the amount of commuting and travel has an environmental benefit. So I think that's something that should be available not only to people in urban areas, but also to people in areas where broadband has not been deployed as much and needs to be.
Thanks, John. Susan, can I ask for your perspective on these environmental justice considerations that we should be thinking about when designing climate policy, and what you're hoping for from the administration on this?
Absolutely. So John, when we think about what we have all gone through in this year, we would never have imagined that we would have had to deal with the pandemic a year and a half ago. We would never have imagined that the pandemic would be a global problem, that no one country by itself can address it. And I look at, as we come out of it, I look at this as a great opportunity for us to build better, build greener, build a more equitable society. And John just mentioned that technology is an enabler in terms of equality and equity. It's a way, and it's a chance for us to bring back those communities and populations that are not participating in our labor pool, for example. And it's also an opportunity for us to create a new future for the United States and for many other communities around the world, because climate change is a problem, but it's also probably the greatest opportunity that we will face. So how we address it, how we involve all of the people that we have, amongst us, would be a testament to how successful and how fast we will resolve this issue in the future.
Great. And Susan, can I ask if you have any thoughts on the environmental justice? I'm sorry, Susan. Barbara. Yeah. Barbara, can I ask?
The other Susan.
Absolutely.
Yes, the other Susan. Exactly.
Absolutely.
It's Friday afternoon.
No,
And I only have 3 of you to keep track of, and I'm still failing in that.
No, Jason, no problem.
What I would say is, the usual focus is on the climate side, but when you think about building a sustainable world and sustainability for the future, it looks at all things from accessing all generations. It looks at diversity and inclusion. It looks at how can you, as you build as you build and as you build progress, how can you have the least environmental impact to all? So I think climate justice and environmental justice has to be at the core of how every organization and how every administration should think about in terms of policies. And we will, you know, we declare ourselves to be a diverse and inclusive organization. And we also make sure that people who don't have access to energy, for example, have that access. So we build in these equitable practices in how we operate in our communities, John.
That's terrific. Thank you, Susan, for that. And Barbara, now over to you.
And listen, I don't know what else I could possibly add, but let me ask you this. Whose world are we talking about? And do we have the right voices in this dialogue? If there's one thing I learned from the pandemic, think about it, all of us were dealing with exactly the same virus, and yet decisions had to be made on a very local level. So what I'm looking for is for our political leaders at the state and local level to work with their constituents to understand what they need. And then for technologists like us to be able to partner with them to say what is the art of the possible and to help them achieve their dream. I'm a big believer in optimism, and that in a moment of disruption like this, we have the greatest opportunity to create the future that we want. And by listening carefully to what others are dreaming of as their future, their brilliant future, what access they would need, what tools they would have at their disposal, how the world would work. By hearing that, internalizing that, we will be able to work together to achieve that view.
So well put. Thank you, Barbara. And as we have just about come to the end of our time together, I'm just going to ask our panelists for their 30-second closing thoughts, how we can continue to carry this forward, not let this be the end, but the beginning of the dialogue as we support the efforts of the Biden-Harris administration on all of these climate policy and justice issues. John, let me start with you. Your closing thoughts to send us off on this Friday afternoon.
Sure. Well, you know, Samsung's committed to mitigating climate change through our products, our practices, our operations. And as I mentioned, energy efficiency, we think, is one of the areas where we have a lot to contribute. Hopefully, I'm sure that is extremely well understood in the administration and Congress. And there may be some opportunities for Congress to take action to incentivize further improvements in energy efficiency through things such as rebates for efficient products. But there's a big toolkit, a lot of things that are needed to move forward. And now's the time.
Indeed. Susan, your closing thoughts?
Jason, I think climate change is a tsunami that's facing us, and it behooves us all of us to partner and to share and to collaborate to drive towards a solution. And I think we have done tremendous things. If you look at humankind, we've done tremendous things. So like Barbara, I'm very optimistic that we can tackle this, and it requires deliberate action to get us to where we need to go.
Terrific. And Barbara, I'll leave you with the last word.
We're in this together. We're in this together, and we are going to need a lot of complementary skills to reach our objectives. We need the technologists, we need the policymakers, we need the dreamers. I do believe that we're developing a community that is dedicated to this and will drive change.
Thank you. John, Susan, Barbara, thank you so much for your wise words and wise counsel today. And I want to again thank Gina McCarthy and Lisa Jackson for kicking off our discussion earlier in the hour. Technology and the technology industry, including ITI's 80 member companies, look forward to continuing to drive solutions to address climate change. To stay connected with us at ITI and all of our member companies and join our work on climate and tech policy issues, please visit us online at itic.org. On behalf of ITI, our great team and members and all of our speakers today, thank you for joining us. Thanks for your continued work, and I wish you all the best for the great days ahead. Take care.
Thank you, Jason.